Hey, hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of the show. Today, I'm talking to somebody that I'm going to describe as the doctor of learning systems. I can't wait. Dr. Ellen Perconti, superintendent at Goldendale School District in the great state of Washington. Thanks for joining us today, Ellen.
It's great to be here.
Welcome. Hey, you started as a music teacher. I did a little bit of research here, and now you're running this brick and mortar and virtual school. Wowzer. That's quite an educational evolution.
Yeah, there it
tell me
is.
tell me what is it like to be Ellen today?
It's interesting when people ask, so, did you plan this trajectory? And absolutely not. It wasn't, I actually started out as a music therapist and then went to music education. And no, it wasn't something that I had plotted out, but I think it goes back to, so in music, you're always looking at how do you improve? What is it about that performance that you can do differently the next time? And so that continuous improvement was just embedded in who I am. And so it's about me, how do I improve? How do I influence more people? How do I support more kids? So that just became the next step and the next step. And here we are.
Yes, yes, and you and I have known each other for a moment, a few years, and I just know you as somebody that has that artisan soul, somebody that is deeply rooted in and grounded in creativity, but in a way that's quite practical, right? As a superintendent, I mean, you taught back in the day, probably teaching scales, my guess,
Yeah.
right? Now to scaling systems that are both brick and mortar and this new evolution of many of your learners coming from even outside of your district, um, involved in virtual education. Tell me, because I know you've got some strategic planning going on at the moment, how does that artisan soul, your lens on the strategic planning process, how might that be a little bit different than maybe that traditional approach that some of the stuff that I might be teaching?
So you influenced me a lot, Joe. So way back when, you helped me learn more about myself and who I am and how I interact with the world. And one of those was one of my strengths that you pulled out was the ability to vision, but also the counterbalance of that of I'm not real great at the details. So when I approach strategic planning, that visioning part is really easy for me. We have a strategic plan that is really focused on a whole child model.
Mm.
So we're not excluding academics. Obviously, we want our kids to learn the knowledge they need in order to interact with the world, but also very intentional about how do we ensure that the child is learning who they are, what their connections are, where they're from, where they want to go, and how they interact with the world. So all of that put together creates a different kind of strategic plan. So our measurements aren't just about some of the real concrete pieces, which frustrates people.
Right.
But
Your math, your science, your graduation, your reading scores, your attendance,
yeah,
or whatever that some of those lag measures. Yeah, tell me a bit more because I'm keenly interested in just deeply rooted into the heart of your school district is whole student development. Well, that sounds cute. It sounds pretty, but I don't know how practical that is.
it's not an easy sell in a lot of different ways. So we just start out with our educators knowing our kids. So who is a child that, as an educator, you're struggling to reach, and how do you get to know them more deeply? And then how do you use that proactively in your learning design or in your conversations if you're a bus driver with the student as they're getting in to the bus? So it really is about who is that child. So part of it is that connection piece, but it's also really intentionally embedding within our learning design those experiences that help the child know. So I really like this, but I'm not so hot about
Mm.
this. What motivates me, what makes me tick. My ideal is that when kids graduate, they walk across the stage, they're able to say, this is who I am, not this is where I want to be, but this is who I am. because our like I said, my trajectory didn't take this nice even little keel, right? And I
Right.
don't know whose does. So it really is about, do I know myself and how I interact with the world enough to know what are those skills that I need and how do I use them? So thinking
That
about
is
the
remarkable. Yes, yes, and not only your influence upon students, but also that family connection. I heard rumor that you kind of blew up your traditional schedule at the beginning of the year, and now you have the first few days really for family connections. Tell us a little bit about where did that come from? I mean, just the foundation of the why, and how is that going in your first few iterations?
So it actually came from COVID. We had to have a way of giving Chromebooks actually to families, and at that point in time, you could only do it one on one. But rather than just giving them the Chromebook, we started with asking questions of the family. So, what are your goals for your student? Where do you want them to be? What do we need to know about your families to better support you? So, just some pretty general questions around that. And what we found was we had we had a better start to the year because our educators knew our families, and our families felt respected. Even this year, we're still having families who say, "I so appreciate you asking me what we want,
Wow.
and how we want to interact with you," rather than, the typical conference schedule is we just vomit all this test data on the parents,
Make them sit in really short chairs. Yes.
right? And so this is really just that teacher sitting one on one with the family, and what do we need to know about you to make this a successful year?
Wow. Yeah, that goes back all the way back to the Coleman report back in the '60s that just gave validity to if you want to create a real healthy society, create those dynamic connections with parents. That's job one of a school district. Well
Yep,
done. Well done. So let's talk about this bifurcated. You've got a brick and mortar school, but you've also created a very robust partnership with is it Washington Connections Academy?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a multi-site management. You've got lots of different types of delivery. You've probably learned a ton because again, from music teacher to traditional superintendent to now this, you're learning how to do both virtual and brick and what synergies are you kind of exploiting? Because you do find synergies, I would imagine, in all of that that traditional districts might not necessarily see. What are you learning?
So we're learning that this is not a great aha, but I'll go ahead and say it. We're learning that education doesn't just happen when you're sitting in a seat in a brick mortar building. So we're reinforcing that across the system of learning happens all in different ways. And I think that's one of the ways that we're meeting the needs of families. And it's a statewide model. So anybody from the state of Washington can join our Connections Academy. It's a public school, so that's part of just that structure here in Washington. And so it really is about how do we meet the needs of families in different ways. When we started here in Goldendale, what we realized was that families were seeking other ways of educating their students. And so, how could we be innovative in providing that? So, that was when we started the partnership with Connections Academy and brought them into our system. And in a lot of ways, it's two separate things. But like you said, there are many different ways where we look at, oh, that's a great idea from over there. How do we pull that in here and use it more effectively?
So, best of both worlds, my guess is you're providing some alternate learning opportunities for your community and beyond. And this is also a revenue generator. Safe to
It
say,
is to a certain extent, yeah. So, there are very few ways in public education that you can find ways to balance your budget.
right?
Grants, which are more and more unstable and less reliable. But this has been a way of really helping us out and keeping things more stable within the system.
Let's talk about this motto that you have: everyone contributing every day. I look at that through the lens also of that's inspirational, but tell me how it's operational.
So when we think about contribution, what we're trying to do is get it into the small moments, because when people
Mm.
think about contribution, they think usually about those really big things. So, how can I donate $1 million to, this charity or whatever? And really what we're looking at is how are our learners contributing to their own learning to the learning of their fellow classmates, to the learning of their school, and then taking that broader to their families and their community. So, starting really small, just letting kids know that it's so important for them to be there because without them there, learning doesn't happen in the same way. And really expressing that. So, what is your contribution to your classroom today and to your classmates? And then how do we learn how to accept it? That's part of that grace piece of, it's like giving gifts, right? Is it easier
Right.
to give or is it easier to receive? And we want our kids to know that they're giving every day. And how does that impact? One of the pieces that we're trying to put in there is that, like kindness, you can't just sprinkle it everywhere. You have to, again, we go back to you have to know who you are. You have to have confidence in yourself in order to contribute to others. You have to know how to communicate and how to connect with others in order to be able to contribute effectively. So, those are all the skill sets that are built underneath that simple logo or the simple motto that we have of everyone contributing every day. It's also just a real piece of, how do you ensure that, there's an energy that you get back when you
Right.
contribute to something else, and so building that within the system as well.
Mm. Yeah, and I think of you've got kindergartners in your building that are probably staying aware of this, but also your school custodians. I mean, and everything in between. What just I love all of that and how it integrates so very well into your whole student development and just some of those empirical truths that you want to teach students in helping them understand who they are before they cross the commencement stage. I'm hosting a roundtable in a couple of weeks. Superintendents and college presidents. I'm pulling them all into one room with a very. I think we have 1 year to figure this out. 1 year to figure this out because the pipeline is broken between pre-K to PhD. Right? We all have our own little turf wars going on. We all have the ways that we do things around here, and we have students that are. Um, who's the artist that said "caught in a trap"? I can't. Yeah, they're just caught in a trap, right? They just they get stuck. So we're looking for some wisdom to say, how do we redesign this pipeline? Because students can learn from anyone, anywhere, at any time right now. So nobody can stand there saying we are the solution
You know?
unless we say collectively. I mean, that's just my that the essence of value that I want to bring to this exchange. So as you think about student, this is my warm up, okay? Because you're a really wise person. You think about students learning anytime, anywhere, from anyone. How can we do that better than we are today? And when I say we have a year to figure this out, I mean AI is changing so fast, and this is not about AI. I don't think anything's about AI. I think everything's about our practice, enriched by the tools and resources that we have. So I know that you're one that thinks along those lines of, we're not quite where we need to be as a system. Any just wise things that you've been bubbling in that brain of yours that are maybe a little non-traditional that might fit into this roundtable discussion that we could talk about for a minute or two right here? Thoughts? There's a lot there, wasn't there?
There is a lot there. I agree with you that we're on a tight timeline. We have not adapted as this is, we've seen this coming. The wave is here, and we have not adapted quickly enough as educators. Um, the wisdom, I mean, you said it, right? So learning happens anytime, anywhere. So how do we get better at identifying when that learning has taken place and or supporting the skills needed in order to actually access that learning? I mean, it goes back to what is the definition of learning, right? Is it when you apply something? Is it when you can regurgitate facts? But that's part of our system that's broken is we don't need to regurgitate facts. I can
Right.
Google those up or whatever, whatever engine you want. I can find those facts. How do I use them productively? And what does that look like? And how do we stay human in the process? So I don't know that I have wisdom. I have a lot more questions.
Well, I wish it weren't as complex as it really is because, again, you have to look at the whole student and what. What is it that we're trying to impact? And what is it that we're not creating because it's already created?
Right.
How are we looking to advance that and provide conditions for that to continue to grow and develop so there, it looks like you and I at some point that had a wonderful foundation back there. I'm going to come into a close, but then we're going to have a little bit of fun. I love your approach, Ellen. I think you and Disney, right? You're reimagineering what education, what schools ought to be. You're doing it in practice. You've got a ton of theory that backs that up as well, and you're also just proving what educators, they just don't teach subjects, right? We engineer ecosystems that allow for our communities uh, to thrive. And that's what you're doing. Any last wisdom to those that are trying to transform their systems that might feel a little bit stuck right now? You got a few years under your belt. You've got some experience.
I would say find that grain of truth that you believe in and persist. It is so easy to look for the next catchy phrase, the new silver bullet, whatever you want to call it. And how do you just keep that trajectory? Yes, you have to adapt your approach. Yes, you have to adapt how you're doing it because there's no through line of anything, but just staying true to who you are, who you believe, what you believe. And it's easy for me in public education because it's about our children. And if it wasn't about that, I don't know where I'd be. But
Mm.
keeping that in mind, it's easy to get distracted and not remember. This is the child in front of us that we're about.
Well, indeed, you are well placed. You want to have a little bit of fun?
Oh, sure.
I've been having fun. I don't know if you're having fun. Okay, we do a lightning round at the end of these little jam sessions here just to keep everybody human. I'll ask you a few questions and tell me first thing that's coming to your mind. On flight, window or aisle?
Aisle.
Okay.
I want
Favorite
out.
yeah. Favorite instrument, music teacher?
Piano.
Okay. A book. I know you're an avid reader. So one book on your nightstand right now.
So one that I am toying with right now is it's like 4 weeks to a stoic reality, and I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's just kind of daily lessons for 4 weeks. Of course, it took me longer than 4 weeks to get through it, but just some of the reality of where we are.
A hidden talent.
Cooking, pizza specifically, but yeah, cooking.
Your favorite search tool?
I go to Google,
No,
Google Chrome,
traditionalist. So from the great state of Washington, great football, Huskies or Cougars?
University of Iowa Hawkeyes.
Off the board for 50, Jack. We're wow. Your weirdest food combination when you cook?
um, so Yeah, I don't know that I have one that I usually use, but I know one I don't use, which is
Okay.
you can't have pineapple on pizza.
You're not gonna wanna tell Miss Becky that because that's the only thing Friday night, it's her pineapple sweet swine, we call it. Pineapple and
There you go. Yeah, but
Canadian
you're from
bacon.
Minnesota.
Yeah, totally. Sweet swine, sweet swine. Hey, if you were not a superintendent, and I hope that never happens because you're so well placed, but what career would you find intriguing?
So it used to be that I wanted to be a research librarian, but maybe now I'm thinking it should be an AI prompter. So how do you get the
Uh,
synthesis of information that you need?
Modern day research librarian. I like that. Most embarrassing song on your playlist right now?
Most embarrassing thing is I don't have a playlist.
Okay, best advice you've ever received.
Probably the best advice is don't give advice.
Right there. There it is, folks. And that's the show. If you're not rethinking your entire definition of educational achievement right now, I hope this spurred you on, folks. Ellen just demonstrated that effective educational leadership is about maintaining systems, not just setting things up traditionally. It's about transforming them really from the inside out. And it has been so fun to watch your trajectory, boss. So, this is a show where we discover that the best leaders don't just adapt to crisis, right? Or manage each day, right? They transform crisis into catalysts for systemic change for those that we love. Thank you, Ellen, and everybody else for tuning in today.
Thank
Peace.
you.